Well, good morning. Thank you all for coming. My name is Mike McGran. I'm the director of the Family Business and Entrepreneurship Program here at St. Joe's, and we're thrilled to have you. It's the first of our ongoing series of seminar events. We are here at St. Joe's, we are focused passionately on family businesses. We're a membership organization for family businesses that are committed to long-term social and economic wealth creation. We want to be a resource, the resource in the Delaware Valley, in the region, in the Northeast, and across the country eventually for family businesses that are thinking about how do we compete into the next generation. And from our perspective, whether you remain a family business that makes chairs or newspapers or auto parts or bacon, or you expand into other things, there's no right or wrong thing for a family to do. We just want to see families thinking proactively about their long-term future. And we have a great group of panelists here to talk about what they have done, what their experiences are in working through what is a huge challenge for family businesses, for any business, public or not private, which is the leadership transition process. Before we begin, I want to say thank you to our sponsors. As I mentioned to you, our goal here at the St. Joe's Program for Family Business Entrepreneurship is to be thinking about the issues that are critical to the long-term success, long-term strategy, the competitiveness, the unity of a family business. Because as we were talking earlier, our guests here were saying, you know, one thing is running the business, but the other challenge is how do you maintain a unified family group? Those are the strategies, those are the challenges that we want to be thinking about. We are incredibly grateful for the support of our sponsors. Because what do I know, the list of things that I know about wealth management, particulars, or tax strategy or insurance strategy is short. For those issues, we turn to our sponsors, and they have been amazing in terms of providing financial support, insight, advice on how do we grow, what are issues facing family businesses. So thank you to PricewaterhouseCoopers, Sean in the back there, others from PwC. Thank you to Saul Ewing, a law firm that knows family businesses well, has a practice that focuses exclusively on family businesses so they understand them well. And the new managing partner of the firm is a good friend, someone I've been working with for about 15 years. Saul Ewing, folks, where are you? Just raise your hand real quick. Thank you. Morgan Stanley has been one of our founding members. They've been with us from the beginning. And I'm not sure if Phil is here yet, but again, questions about wealth management, they're the folks. And AUA Capital Management, a firm founded by folks who have been good friends for many, many years and focus on family office issues. Mike, where's Mike? Raise your hand. Mike Salerno from AUA Capital. And then Creative Financial Group, who has been the sponsor, our newest sponsor, someone who's been with us for a couple months, but has been a huge part of helping make this program today happen and has invested significantly. In fact, I just want to introduce Q Strom. Q is a tax attorney and CPA. He's one of the managing partners at Creative Financial Group, and he's formerly a national director of estate planning at Price Waterhouse. I wonder, Q, if you just stand up, say hello, introduce yourself, and you know, when it comes to insurance and risk management, these are the folks that we turn to for questions. These sponsors, part of the value proposition for what our members receive is one of the first things we do is a survey of the shareholder group. We ask a number of questions of your shareholders and get a sense for where are you as shareholders on the same page and where are you not. In a sense, developing an action plan for as shareholders what we should be working on. And our sponsors have been huge in terms of helping us prepare those agendas, prepare those questions, and are willing to sit down and answer any questions you have. You've attended a seminar here before, you've seen these statistics. They get me excited. And these statistics show that family businesses outperform non-family businesses on nearly every measure of competitive success. So whether we're talking about return on equity, return on assets, sales growth, net income growth, family businesses outperform non-family businesses over the long term. The question is why? What's in the soup? And that's what we want to help families understand. And each of you have a different soup, different flavor, different ingredients. Your challenge as family business leaders is to be deliberate and proactive and intentional about figuring out what's in that soup and then managing it. And what our panelists here today have done a great job is just that. one of the questions we ask family businesses all the time is part of this concept of figuring out what's in your soup is being honest, as Jim Collins says, being brutally honest about where your familyness is an advantage, where it helps you create wealth, where it helps you compete, and where your familyness is a constraint. Because for every family in the entire world, including my own, there are points at which your familyness, the fact that you are owned by a family, creates advantages and where it creates constraints. And we want you to be deliberate and intentional about talking about those issues. Okay? So with those, one more quick slide. We're talking about managing leadership transitions here today. And from our perspective, and I know that our panelists share this perspective, that leadership transition is not a death issue. A lot of times senior generation folks don't want to talk about leadership succession because to them it means I'm being put out to pasture or my kids are kicking me out the door. From our perspective, leadership transition is not a death issue. It's not a putting mom or dad out to pasture issue. It's a strategy issue. It is a strategic issue because if mom or dad walk out the business without having thought strategically about what are the resources and capabilities embodied in you, and you take those out the door, you change the resource pool of your company, and it cannot compete. So again, from our perspective, leadership transition and succession is a strategy issue. It's about figuring out what are the unique resources and capabilities embodied in the senior generation, and then having a plan, a strategic plan, for transitioning those to the next generation. Because if you allow those to walk out the door without planning, you change your resource pool and you can't compete. We are really honored to have a great group of panelists here today. Each of these are families that I've been honored to come to know, individuals I've been honored to come to know over the last number of years. Carolyn Greenspon and I have worked together. Carolyn is not only a fifth-generation family member of the New York Times and the first of her generation to serve on the board and board of trustees, but I've also had the honor to work with her. She does a lot of work with family businesses. So she has her own private, she is a consultant works with family businesses, has enormous experience in her own family business as well. Christin McClave, Christin and I came to know each other probably 15 years ago, and she's a third-generation family member. Her husband worked in the family business. She's worked closely with her brother, who is in the family business, and she works with families across the country as a dynamic speaker, and we're honored to have her. And John and I met last spring, when John is a member of the senior management team at Hatfield Quality Meats. As many of you saw, Tom Clemens was going to be here, but his daughter is having her first baby this morning. So he couldn't make it, and we're very honored and grateful to John to come and join us. And John speaks extensively about family businesses, and we're really thrilled to have you. So I'd like to begin, actually, can each of you just take a turn and just tell us a little bit about yourself? I just gave a brief introduction, but tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and briefly about your family.
So I work for a company which is called Relative Solutions. It's a family advisory business company. It's a firm. It's a national firm, mainly out of New York, although I live in Boston. And I've been there for about 4 years now. And as Mike said, prior to that, I did some private work consulting to families in business. We not only in terms of families who actually run operating companies, but also families who've liquidated and now also manage a diverse portfolio. As I'll talk a little bit about, I come from a behavioral science background, but growing up in the family I did, I saw sort of firsthand what it's like to be in a family that has to sort of make decisions together and own things together, and got kind of very interested in that. Have sort of an organizational psych background and learned to work in systems, and grew up in my own family's real governance system, which I'll sort of describe as we go through the panel. We have a pretty large governance structure, and served on several different committees and ran different programs throughout it, and got very interested and ultimately did sort of a therapy practice, but got very interested in doing some consulting work. So ultimately ended up in helping other families do sort of some of the business that we had to do. Do you want me to keep moving?
That's look good, perfect.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I'm Christin, Cardone, McClave. Our company is Cardone Industries, and we remanufacture automotive parts. Here, our headquarters is in Northeast Philadelphia, right off the boulevard, the old Sears headquarters, if you know. And I am involved in my family. I'm on the board as one of the family directors. I also head up our family governance process and am working with our third generation. We have second generation and third generation, and we also have a very rapidly growing fourth generation. And I have 3 little ones who are under 11 and under. And right now, my business is coaching next generation leaders in different types of businesses, but I do focus on family businesses because that's where my passion is and that's where my experience lies. I did work in my family business from age 12 to 20 every summer. And then when I was about a junior in college, I was, saying to myself, I've got to get out of here and go work somewhere else. So I actually started my career and spent a good amount of time at Johnson & Johnson in technology and in the leadership program there. And then, as Mike said, my husband... I actually met my husband there one of those summers, and he worked in the family business for 20 years and left 2 years ago to start his own business. And in between there, we moved overseas when our company bought a company in Belgium, and we moved overseas for the company. And anything else I missed there, Mike?
Good.
Okay.
That's good. John?
Yeah, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
My name's John Reininger, and I serve with the Clemens Family Corporation, which is actually the parent company of Clemens Food Group and Clemens Development. And Clemens Food Group is a holder of many brands, and the brands that you may know or best known for would be Hatfield Quality Meats. And I serve at the Clemens Family Corporation. I've been there for about 24 years, and you mentioned in our outlaws, and I like to talk to myself as a first-round draft pick in the business. Not an outlaw or an in-law, but I served there as the Chief Relationship Officer. And that responsibility basically allows me to deal with any shareholder issue, any family issue that would distract our CEO or our president from adding value to the shareholders. And I'll talk a little bit about that shareholder and family base a little bit later, but it's a fairly large base with a lot of dynamics that we get to enjoy. Also, I have the opportunity to serve as the chairman of the philanthropic committee for the company, and also serve as the chairman of the Owners Advisory Council, which is a group that I'll talk about a little bit later also, but the function of the Owners Advisory Council is to speak as one voice for all our shareholders. So thanks for the opportunity, and I think our shareholder base is probably going to increase by 1 about 10 o'clock this afternoon.
That's right. That's right. Obviously, we want it to be very, very interactive. So if at any point you have a question, you have a concern, something doesn't make sense, please just raise your hand. We've got microphones around, and want it to be very interactive. Obviously, these are incredible, interesting, dynamic businesses, and we're going to be focusing on leadership succession. But as a business, as a person who works with a lot of businesses and teaches business, I'm really curious to hear from each of you about your individual business model. Each of you face unique challenges. We're all aware of some of the challenges in the media business. Christin, your family business has, one of its strong points is its focus on core values, and we want to hear from you about what happens when those core values come into conflict with the global, with China. And John, if you could talk to us a bit about how your family, which is your family business, which has grown enormously, but has really expanded and become what we call portfolio entrepreneurs. So first, Carolyn, tell us a bit about we all know the media business is tough. It's a difficult time. What are you guys doing? What's the plan? How are you addressing it at the board level? What are your thoughts?
And maybe I should also start. I just want to be clear because I know the others set up a little bit of their role in terms of in the business, and I just want to make sure it's clear of sort of my role there because I don't think I did that in terms of the introduction. So currently, I serve on the board of directors. I just want to clarify this a little because I think it will be helpful in terms of that. And we have the family, it's a family-controlled business. It's obviously a public company, the New York Times, and there are 12 board members, and there are 4 family members that are on the board of directors. 2 of them are in top management positions, and 2 of the board members, one of which is me, are family members who also sit on the board. And the way the company is structured, just to let you know, is that there is a voting trust that the shareholders created about 20 years ago that controls the voting. There's A shares, which are which anyone can own, and the B shares are held, but 85% of them are held in a voting trust that mainly the family members have. And it is these B shares that really can vote the board of directors and therefore really control the company. So I just want to sort of explain a little bit more of kind of the structure of the company. And the way the shareholders, I'm sorry to take the time on this,
No,
but I
it's
just
good.
think it's sort of important. The way the family is sort of set up in terms of shareholders is the shareholders have elected trustees to be over these shares. And I'm also one of the trustees. There are 8 trustees from the family, and these same trustees are also on the board to vote these particular shares. And this is the way that also the family has sort of the say and the voice in the boardroom. And again, you'll get a flavor, hopefully, as I go in terms of how we, operate and how the family has the voice and talks about this. Because, on the other hand, because it's a public company, and not only because it's a public company, but one of the things the family is very much values and very much is put in place is the importance of having independent board members, which I'll also talk about. So there are 8 independent board members, and we really feel like that's important. So when we go back to your original question here in terms of thinking about the business model, one of the things that's really important is to make sure we have board members who really understand the challenges that are ahead of us, that really bring in all the value that we need. You heard a little bit of my background. I'm not going to be like the guru tech person who's going to be, talking about like key strategy in terms of that. Hopefully I can offer, other strategy and other advice. But it's really important when we sit down as a board of directors and think about some of these, strategic challenges and strategic issues that you're getting, a better, a variety sense and the expertise that's needed. So anyway, I just wanted to sort of put that out there, if you will. But in terms of the challenges right now and how we're thinking about them, what we've had to do, and of course this is not news, I'm sure, to any of you. Is it on or?
Yeah, it is. I'm just going to slide it over a little
Sure.
bit for you.
What we've really had to do is go from a traditional newspaper company to figure out how to distribute news and content on a variety of different mediums and through a variety of different products. And as you all know, it's been an incredibly challenging and, sort of needing to do it in an incredibly challenging way and do it in incredible speed. And this has been the task for all of us. What you've probably also, depending on how closely you follow the industry, what we had a variety of, right now the New York Times Company not only has our sort of flagship just in terms of the assets we now have, it not only includes the New York Times Company, NewYorkTimes.com, and the International Herald Tribune, but over the summer, we got rid of the Boston Globe and bostonglobe.com. We used to have a variety of different, also regional newspapers, 18 total, and a variety of different magazines and radio stations. But what we've had to do in terms of our business model is think about going back to core brand. One of the things as a family member that we've all grown up with is thinking about sort of the values of the values of what sort of has been in my family, for over 100 years, and the value of the product that we have and the content. And what we found has made us sort of unique in terms of as a company is the content. I mean, that seems to be what people will continue to pay a high subscription for, keeps up our circulation. When ad revenue continues to decline, seems to be the key thing they keep coming back for. So what we've done is figured out strategically in terms of our business model, going to the core and even, selling off assets we need to continue to figure out a business model that will get us through. So bottom line, I know I'll turn over to Christin in a second, is getting to the core, staying with the content we know is unique and people will pay for, and figuring out how to produce it as fast as you can, all the different products that everyone wants, as tablets, mobile, video, and trying to get it out there. And so far, even though it's been difficult, it seems to be successful. And we just had earnings actually come out yesterday. I mean, it seems we're actually a company that shrunk considerably but is making money.
Good.
So.
Good.
We have a little bit different of a contrast to Carolyn's story because we are completely privately held, and we have 6 shareholders. So we have a very small shareholder group at this point, and the challenges that we have as a company, if any of you know our company or have read anything about our company, my grandfather and my father founded our company on strong Christian values. We have a Christian heritage and legacy that's a part of the company. It's been a part of our family story, and also really is connected on the philanthropic side. We take 10% of the profits of our company and put it into our foundation, and we work together as a family to and focus our philanthropy around organizations that are touching our employee base. So we do a lot of work in North Philadelphia surrounding our factories there. And we also have a large operation now in Matamoros, Mexico. And this ties in to our main strategic challenge right now that is, probably facing a lot of you as well, is, finding the right footprint that can keep you competitive in the market and also competitive with, China and other low-cost producers in other countries. It's the main topic of conversation in our board meetings right now. My father and grandfather were passionate about providing jobs in the inner city, and it's something that we have taken on as well. I mean, my brother and my brothers, both of them, I have an older brother and a younger brother. We're also really passionate about the legacy of providing jobs. We have 6,000 employees, and we're struggling with that issue. That's a real challenge for us now. How do we, keep jobs where they're needed most and also remain competitive? And I'll talk a little bit about our leadership transition. I guess that's our next question. We went through, I'll just touch on it briefly because it ties into this strategic challenge. 2 years ago, my father decided to sell the business. He didn't know what else to do. We kind of were, trying to figure out a way that he could retire. And I can, be honest with everybody in the room here and say we had not put in a strong family governance process like I'm sure Carolyn's been experiencing over the years to bring you together and have that conversation. How do we help Dad retire? And you don't want it to be a unfortunate event. You want it to be a planned out transition process. So I'll just kind of step through that quickly. We didn't sell the business. My father retired last year, and we hired a non-family CEO, and he's been with us for exactly 1 year now. And one of the challenges that we have with that transition is really how do we maintain our familyness when my father's not the CEO anymore. My brother is the only remaining family member working in the business. I'm on the board, but I don't work in the operating business. So that's a challenge for us as well, and we're working on that as we speak. How do we maintain our family values and keep that familyness growing as the company grows? Our CEO has, got us on a really good growth trajectory, but at the same time, tying that in with the things that are really important to us, and we're learning.
It is, I know a bit about your family, and it's such a challenge. Cardone remanufactures automobile parts, and as Christin said, these are inner city. It's up the road here on Route 1. UAW workers. So you've got UAW workers with a largely manual labor process manufacturing a product which now suddenly is facing competition from China. And the thing that's so challenging, I think, is so wonderful about the family is when you walk in, what's that banner say? It's hanging from the ceiling of the factory?
We have many banners.
Yeah, the one
Honor God in all we do.
The one I just struck me is we value our word, our
Yes.
witness, and our people.
Yeah.
And so as a family, how do you, when faced with, we're committed to the city of Philadelphia and our employees here, and at the same time, China is coming in with a product that's significantly less costly than ours.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's and Christin is very modest, but the amazing thing about their business is that as a result of, at 7 a.m. when the whistle blows, there's complete silence in this factory. And every single assembly line, the workers are holding hands, and they are, exactly, they're praying. So, what if, does that happen at General Motors or Ford? It's like, clearly not. So what? Well, they've done research that indicates that productivity is significantly higher than any other competitor in their business. And turnover, which if you think about the cost of training someone to do the kind of labor they do, turnover is significantly lower than anybody else in the industry. So it's just an amazing example of a family who said, these are our core values, and you guys have made them real, and it impacts the bottom line. The question is, I'll just repeat the question for folks in the back. Were any of the siblings, were you, Christin, or your brothers interested in the business or qualified, or how did you end up with a non-family CEO?
It's a good question. My brother is 40. He's the president of the company. And he also came to the conclusion, I think, along with, my dad really struggling through. My brother's been a key part in just working with the strategy of the company and working with through the whole private equity auction process. He was, kind of walking my dad through that process with their senior team, and it was pretty clear to him. And if he was here, he and I spoke about this in June, actually, at a Next Generation Summit. And it was clear to him that he was not the right person for this next job. We really needed someone who, could come in and I'll use the word bully, and Kevin, our CEO, would actually like that word. to describe him. We needed someone to come in. We have six major customers, are 80% of our business. And being a family business in the space we're in auto parts, there are lots of bullies out there. And our customers, I think over time, because of, my father has a lot of relationships in the industry, and, there just got to be kind of a sense of, oh, they're a family business. They'll take another price decrease. They'll do this, And there were just so many concessions. And when we brought up the idea of bringing in a non-family CEO, I think my brother really understood that we needed some muscle on the other side to come in and say, hey, you guys are a family business, but you're doing really, amazing work here, and you shouldn't be kind of getting the short end of the stick because you're a family business. And that's been really, really healthy for our company. He came in, he also did a lot of reshuffling. We've had, a lot of wonderful, wonderful employees who have been there for a long time, but knowing that we needed to professionalize our business and take it to a new level from a growth perspective, we needed someone to come in and make some really hard calls. We have moved a few product lines to Mexico since he's been there, that we're not making money here. So he's made some really tough calls that I think were really difficult for my dad to make, and also my brother. My brother has always worked in the business from when he got out of college, so he also, didn't have that kind of outside perspective to come in and say, hey, you guys are getting beat up here. We need to do something about this. So it's been really healthy, really helpful for just kind of right-sizing the company, getting us to, our numbers look great this year compared to the last few years. And I think, he was the right person to bring in at the right time when, my dad really started struggling the last few years. And our company is big. And my dad looked around and said, I don't have the energy for this anymore. I want to quit. That's what my dad said. I want to quit. I said, Dad, you can't quit.
John, tell us, we'll come back to this, really important, several important issues raised there. But John, tell us a bit about the business model, and what's so interesting about your business is how you've become a portfolio of companies.
Sure. First of all, as we talk about our businesses and what we do, I want to be totally transparent and tell you we don't have the answers, and we pretty much mess up every day. And it's easy to sit up here and talk about the things that are going on, but trust me, it's been a journey. And we've been fortunate on that journey. We've been blessed on that journey. We've been in this business for 118 years, and we've got to give the credit back to the Lord. Like the Cardone Industries, we put great faith in our heritage. Our mission statement is we aspire to operate in a way that honors the Lord Jesus Christ through integrity, ethics, and stewardship. And we try to break that down to our 2,200 team members in the business on what that means, and we break it down into core values. And there's 3 core values that we strive to work with and as. And the first one that we strive would be integrity. Would actually be ethics, because ethics is more important, because ethics just means I'll do the right thing. Integrity is I'll do what we say we're going to do, and stewardship is we build a foundation for the future. So our business model is we attempt to model that to our team members, so they see it, they feel it, and they embrace it. And the 118 years that we've been in business, through 6 generations, the credit needs to go to, I think, to those core values and to Jesus Christ. Our business model is somewhat of a upside down model, if you will. We really, as senior leadership, try to operate as servant leaders. If you ask our president what he does, he'll tell you he's a general helper. If you ask our executive vice president, he'll tell you he's the general helper's assistant. And the people that run our business are our customers. That's who we all report to. So we really take seriously the servant leadership model, and try to operate in that way. Some of the challenges that we have in our industry, in our business, is, we make a lot of pork products, and I'm sure most of you have been through the meat case in grocery stores or in restaurants, and everybody makes meat products. Anybody can make or do what we do, and we believe that our business model needs to be that we need to provide solutions to our customers to make their lives easier and to make their businesses more profitable. So we're not really in the meat business, we're in the solutions providing business, and we take that very seriously, and that's kind of how we conduct our business and go to market on a pretty much on a daily basis. A little bit about our senior leadership. Currently, we have a family member at the helm of the corporation, of the Clemens Family Corporation, who is due to retire in the next 18 months. Our food group division has a family member at the helm, and soon he'll be replaced probably with a non-family member, which may be the first that we've ever had in our organization. And then in addition to that, we have 24 family members working in the business of 2,200 team members in total. So it's a fairly large group. You mentioned about diversification. We've been in the meat business for a long, long time, but with the number of shareholders and the cash needs that our shareholders have, we decided that we needed to diversify our business. So our facility, which is located just off the northeast extension up in Hatfield, we had quite a bit of land around our property, so we decided to take that land, which was actually being rented by local farmers to grow crops, as we've taken that land and we've developed a real estate division called Clemens Development, where we actually have now begun to develop that property in the form of mainly ground leases, and have grown that business over the last several years to have tenants such as Wawa, Univest, Lowe's, Chick-fil-A, and things like that. And the whole function of the development division is to produce enough revenue to meet the needs of our shareholders, which our shareholders look to get between redemptions and charitable contributions. Our shareholders look to get about $10 million per year given back to them. So the thought was we don't want to take cash out of the food business, because that's the goose that lays our golden eggs. We'll try to continue to reinvest with that. So the function of the real estate division is to generate cash needs for the shareholders. Also, several years ago, we had to diversify into more of a farming operation, where we actually raise a little over 1 million pigs a year. And the reason we got into that venture is because as urban sprawl grew out in the Lancaster, Harrisburg area, a lot of our producers of hogs weren't able to maintain business. So we chose to get into the hog raising business, not out of desire, but out of survival. And so we produce about 1 million pigs a year, which is a pretty complex, interesting business. And that supplies about half of our needs throughout the year. So we have the meat business, which is a family of brands. We have the real estate division. We have a farming division. And then also we have a cold storage facility. It's a third-party facility that offers refrigeration and delivery services to customers other than ourselves. So it's not intended for ourselves. So
The logistics business.
Yep.
Talk a little bit about how the transition that occurred. Phil talks about being a business family versus a family business, and that transition that happened about 10 years ago.
Yeah, and Christin kind of touched on it when her brother was able to admit, I'm really not prepared for this position. Back in 2000, we hit a really rough spot that we noticed that our sales had doubled, but our profits had remained the same. And the problem was we ended up having too many family members in a family business, and these family members were entitled to position because of their bloodline, and that was hurting our business. So back in 2000, we had to make some decisions, because you cannot continue to double sales and profits remain the same. So we had to make some decisions on what we wanted to do with the business, and everything was on the table, from selling to keeping to doing nothing. And back in 2000, a group was put together from second, third generations, And that group got together to kind of put a plan together on what we wanted to do with the business. And the result of that was we wanted to maintain the business, so we had to make some radical changes. So we made a decision to go from a family business to a business family. So, what's that mean? What's the difference? Well, a family business really is there for one main purpose, and that's to maintain family harmony. That's first and foremost, and profits generally are secondary. Where a business family, the difference there is profits are expected and respected. So when you make that switch from a family business to a business family, you need to, as you said, professionalize your business and look at it from a different perspective. So when we said, all right, if we're going to make that transition, we need to go ahead and evaluate who we have in the business and see the leadership and the value that they bring. And the result of that is we had to let several family members go. At that point, our board was all family. We fired the entire board. We fired, and some of the individuals we fired, one of the shareholders we fired was a 25% owner in the business. So it wasn't, like it was insignificant shareholders. It was some large shareholders. So we had to make that transition, and we professionalized our management. We brought in some professional management. Some of the family that was asked to leave to go get outside experience and come back. But it was heart-wrenching. It was, and it still is today. 13 years passed, but it's tough when a father has to fire his son, a brother has to fire his brother. So it was really tough. But I can tell you, if we didn't do what we did, then we wouldn't be here today. Somebody would have purchased us. We would have been gone. So we made that tough decision, and we continued to work through some emotions. But for the most part, since we made that transition 13 years ago, our stock has grown 16% annualized for the last 13 years. So it's, financially, it's been a good decision, but there's some wounds to heal. But again, from the business standpoint, you look at the organization as a business. Everybody has evaluations. Everybody gets has goals and budgets, and so it's been a welcome. It's been a welcome change, and for myself, I've been with the company 24 years, but I spent 10 years prior to coming to the business in a public company, so it wasn't that big of a shock to myself. It was actually welcome to see, but it's put us on the right track, and we still have a lot to figure out as we go, though.
Question?
Did you make that transition using an outside consulting firm or primarily inside people?
Yeah, we had to bring an outside consulting firm. And that individual's role was pretty simple. He would always ask the same question over and over again. He said, when we had tough decisions, he would always ask us, are you doing the right thing, or do you want to do the easy thing? And when you keep asking yourself that question, the right thing or the easy thing, that kept us on track on what the right thing was. And when we went through the whole process to make the changes in the votes, the committee that was put together, there had to be 100% agreement on any changes, so everybody had veto power. So it had to be unanimous for the votes to let people go and reorganize. So, but yes, we had an outside help. We couldn't have done it without it.
Right. The question is, how's the board sort of gets into the question of overall governance, and who's on the board, and what's the role of the board for each of you? Is that a fair summary? Mix of family, non-family?
We went from the board was totally family, and the board was totally family, and the way you got to the board is you were there the longest, so you're now on the board. That board was totally disbanded, and we went ahead with an outside board of directors. We have 4 outside directors and 3 inside directors or family members. The CEO is a family member, and the responsibility of our board is to communicate with our Owners Advisory Council. And the Owners Advisory Council is made up of a group of third-generation family members, and they set the owners' expectations for performance and returns. They, in turn, communicate that to the board. It is the board's responsibility then to to hold management accountable that the owner's expectations are met. So we kind of work off of a kind of, we call our trust triangle. So the goal is that the owners group does not communicate and talk with management to hold them accountable. It's the board's responsibility to hold management accountable. So that's kind of the function of our board. Our owners group, they elect the board, and each board member is a one-year term. So there's an opportunity if the owners don't like the way things are going, they can remove our board members, but we haven't had any situations with that. But it is 3 inside, 4 outside, and the role and responsibility is to hold senior leadership accountable for delivering the plan.
Yes, so our board is made up of 6 independent outside directors, and we have 3 family members, and our CEO also sits on the board. My father is the chairman, and my brother and I are the family directors. My brother still works inside the business. And we have a family governance, a family kind of task force, family council, whatever you want to call it. We actually are trying to make up a new name for it because we have some, some stories about what the old name means. So we're trying to create actually a new story that includes spouses and in-laws and thinking about our next generation kids. So we're actually in this reimagining process, I'll call it right now, and with different task forces related to education and philanthropy and shareholder education and that kind of thing. So, yeah, does that answer your question? Yeah. And just quickly, I think we might touch on it later, but for me, I've been sitting in board meetings for 3 years, and our independent directors just recently, as of last December, voted me onto the board. So, and this was a unique situation because they actually wanted to do that soon. We had kind of a lot of different things going on at one time. We, had the situation of selling the business, then not selling the business, then bringing a non-family CEO on. And we had a pretty good, strong governance process with our board, but we realized once our new CEO came on, there were a lot of things we needed to get more disciplined about, and our committee structures were a little bit loose. I'll say loosey-goosey. And so we've gotten really disciplined just in the last year, working with an advisor from Deloitte's governance practice, who is our board advisor, and he's helped us put those in place. And also, the board elected me to be the chair of the nominating committee. So as a family member, I'm learning as I go. It's not something I have experience in. But as a family member now, I work with our shareholder group to start learning about the process of bringing on board members who can honor our family values, but at the same time have the professional experience that our CEO needs to support him.
In fact, so the question is, how did you go about hiring that non-family CEO? In fact, let me build on that question. Just have each of you speak to this leadership transition process, because 2 of you have just recently gone through it. John, you mentioned Phil is going to retire in the next 18 months, so you are in the midst of it right now. So to Scott's question, talk through about that process of, at the management level, of bringing in, how did it work, who drove it, what kind of pain did it cause?
So we, and it's interesting to hear the 2 of you speak about it too, because in our company, we have had for many years a non-family CEO. We also have family member in a top leadership position as well. So we have a family member who's held the position as the chairman and publisher, who basically sits next to the non-family CEO in the company. But just this past year, we did have a transition, so we had to hire a new CEO for the company. And the way that works is ultimately it goes to the board. to have the jurisdiction over that hire. But as I talked about earlier, the trustees who really work with the board are also very involved. But and I think this probably applies to, any family, is it's really key whenever you have a leadership transition. We had a CEO who was in there for, a number of years, that when you're thinking about a transition, this transition also happened quickly. It wasn't sort of a planned one, which, as we all know, unfortunately does happen from time to time, is to think about sort of what is the organizational structure below. And especially with thinking about families, it's where are the other, what are the other positions in terms of the org chart going on? Where is the family in it? What do the family shareholders think about this? So taking a few minutes, it's not literally, but taking the time to understand what does the family think. In our situation is, what do the trustees think? What do we want the goals to be of this next CEO? But it was clear you needed to understand what are the roles and responsibilities going to need to be of the CEO versus the chair. And you really need to think about this in terms of the management positions. What I'm struck by, and I think about this, I didn't talk about this as much, but is that in all of these companies, the values and the mission that drive these companies, it seems, is huge. It seems to me that that's something that all of you should, I feel like we all should think about. It really seems to be a core thing which has made these companies successful. It seems like it's a core thing that I certainly hear from the two of you, and I know from my experience, keeps the employees sort of coming to work, or you talk about keeps people praying in the morning, but it seems like it's a core thing which is to the success. And when I think about even you go to CEO succession and finding the right people and putting things together, it seems like a mission-driven company with the family piece is such a key thing in it. Mike, I don't know if it's the right time. One thing I want to mention is, the other thing we do is, and we've learned this, I should say, sometimes the hard way, is we definitely learned, so as I mentioned, I'm the 5th generation, and when we have right now 6 5th-generation members of my family working in the company, there were 5 4th-generation members working in the company. But when they came in, it was a smaller family. I should say there are about 60 shareholders now. We count spouses as being shareholders. When they were there really wasn't. We didn't have a governance structure. We didn't have a family council. We didn't have the trustees. We didn't have an investment group. We didn't have a philanthropy group. These are the things we've put in place over the last 20 years. So when those 5, this is sort of my parents' generation, came in, there was no family employment policy. It was probably, they called up, this was my great uncle who was there, I want a job. I mean, I'm not exactly sure how it worked, but it was a little more like this, 30 years ago, probably over 30 years ago. And they all got there, but there wasn't the structure there for them to feel evaluated properly. They didn't really know if their bosses thought they were doing a good job. If they were told they were doing a good job, they didn't know if they were because they were or because they were, Joe, and they were a family member. And what happened over time was some of them got fired. Some of them were sort of told to leave, some of them left. And a lot of it seemed to have to do with the fact that there really wasn't a group or a committee constructed of both family and of management to really manage this process. So when we had to take a look, and we did hire an outside consultant around this to put in governance, one of the things we were very quick as a family to put in place, this was almost 20 years ago, this is as I'm in college, starting college now, we put together a family career development committee to really think about when the next generation comes into the company, which we do want people working in the company. There need to be criteria of how they come into the company. There need to be we need to figure out how to evaluate them. We need to figure out how to get management in place. We need to figure out all the things involved in figuring out a family employment program. We've been doing this for 20 years. It's been difficult. We didn't do it great at first, but it's been now a really, I think, decently developed program. Again, it was originally sort of designed to, I think, bring people in. As I said, there are now 6 members there. Lots of them are in higher level positions. This group, at one point, was a little more family and some just top management who were non-family members. It now involves the board. It involves a member from an independent from completely outside the company. This will now also be a group that in the future will make decisions around succession for the top family members. So it's something that we do in our family, and certainly Mike mentioned I do this professionally. Certainly putting a family employment policy in place or thinking about that is something when we work with families we do we certainly recommend as well. It doesn't have to be to the same level I'm describing, but it's really sort of an important thing to think about. So I just want to mention a way that's really been helpful to us as a family.
So let me. So the question really is getting to how do you manage this shareholder group and help them understand what the rules of the game are going to be. And we all believe that having family members work in a business can be a great thing if they're going to follow the rules, because family members are incredibly contributive. They've been around the business for a long time, so we want them there, but they got to follow the rules. It's got to be a meritocracy. So let me ask. I want to hold that question for 1 minute because we want to come back to what each of you are doing to manage this shareholder group. And as is it David? Mark. As Mark is saying, how do you get them motivated? How do you get them excited? How do you get them feel passion for, hey, I want to be in this business. This is a great opportunity for them, but not have the entitlement. You want that without the entitlement. So I just want to make sure we hear, as Scott was asking about, how do you manage you've got a non-family CEO, each of you, and then I want to hear from you, John. What are you doing to get ready for Phil's transition? So.
Should I answer the non-family CEO?
Yeah. Talk about how do you
him?
do the transition? How do you get your dad? You talked a bit about your.
Yeah.
I mean, your dad's he's a big. He's a player.
He's a big
he's
personality.
A force, big personality, right?
A big force. Well, I'm happy to say that I have a great relationship with my dad. So, so this was a very unstrategic process, I'll say, as a dynamically different process than the New York Times went through. I had been encouraging my father ever since I'd been sitting in board meetings, and I, shared it at the board level. We need to bring someone in from the outside. We need to bring someone in from the outside because I had worked outside. So, that was just kind of something that, and my brother and I would have conversations about it. It was just, no offense to my brother, but we need that kind of bully coming into the business and really changing a lot of things, making some major adjustments to looking at our business model, looking at our footprint, and someone who had experience doing that before. And then after we went through this whole private equity auction process, which some of you, I see you smirking out there, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. It is like going through I don't know what a good metaphor is, but it's like, taking a rolling pin over your family and just, it's exhausting. And it was exhausting for our executive team. It was exhausting for most of the family. I mean, I would say my younger brother is not really involved in all of that, that process, although our process at this point is to really get more engagement from our shareholder group and also the spouses. So that's kind of, we're at the baby steps, beginning part of that governance process. But the process of hiring a non-family CEO went after the deal fell through. A week later, my dad called me and said, I want to quit. I don't want to go back to work. I don't know what to do. What do you think we should do? Well, I think we should hire someone from the outside. We need a non-family CEO. And, we went back and forth. And then a few days later, our board secretary, who has been a longtime friend and also, very experienced in our business, in auto parts, aftermarket, he and I, kind of made a plan to present the idea of bringing in a search firm, which, as some of you in family businesses know, we don't like to work with consultants. I shouldn't say we, because I like to work with consultants. But my father and our family group, hiring consultants or people from the outside to help us was, kind of the last resort. But we made a plan to find a search firm that actually shared our values. And that was the key to really bringing my father, through the process of hiring them. And then we had weekly meetings reviewing all the candidates every week, and my father, and with the goal of keeping my father from firing the search firm. So that was a really fun process. But I was the family member that worked with our board to, go through the resumes. I think we should, look at this guy. This doesn't feel right. And we used a lot of intuition. I know that is, something not talked about a lot with, in business schools, but it should be. And I think family businesses have very keen intuition sense, and we should be using it more. And so we had some amazing candidates, and what really put our choice, our CEO he really took a second look at our profile, is we wrote this long profile about our company and about our values and about our family and how important it was for us to find someone who matched those. And he said he had never seen a CEO profile, a job, description like this. And we just kind of laid it all out there. And in the end, he was someone that other search firms probably wouldn't have necessarily picked for us. Although, we really feel like it was, the values came first. He does come from Ford and private equity, so he has, definitely the business skills. But, most search firms were throwing us, people from our industry, and my dad's like, I know him, no way, I know him, I know him, I know him. And so, it was a match of values and culture.
Christin, just talk briefly about how, so your father's larger than life, very, very big personality. His oldest son, Michael's a president of the company. And, it had to be, I would think there'd be a tough dynamic for both your father and your brother to kind of get to the point where he says, I'm not the right guy. You say it sounds simple. Was it simple?
Yeah. I don't, my brother is, some of you know my brother. He is like the polar opposite of me. He's a much more, quiet personality. He has, a very different skill set than my father has. And he may still be the right guy. We're not sure. And I'm not even sure if he is going to want that job after Kevin gets through with it. But we, I knew that was a sensitive process, and we, like I was saying, Carolyn had a very, clear governance process, a place where, probably very good structured family meetings where you have these discussions together. We didn't have that in place yet. So I did a lot of work. I'm a coach by training, so I should, be able to help in this process, although you're still a family member. So there's so many hats you're wearing. It's, it all gets blurry at times, and it's hard to remember which hat you're supposed to be wearing. But I saw this happening with my father and my brother over time, and I knew in the end that this would preserve their relationship. But to get, on the other side of it, I think the auction process really kind of took him through the ringer and said, he didn't say, I want to quit and not go back to work, but I felt that from him. He was exhausted at the same time, and I don't think he had the energy right at that moment to say, hey, it's me. I want this position. I want to take over. So he didn't really kind of come forth with that desire, waving the flag, hey, what about me? I think he was ready to have someone else come in and do some really tough work that and if he were here today, he'd tell you it wasn't the kind of thing, that he would be able to, fire some friends of my dad's and people who had been there for so long. It was just really tough stuff that we needed someone outside. But there's potential that he very well could be, our next CEO, and maybe, Kevin is, almost like an interim who can mentor and develop and coach my brother and bring him along, But in the meantime, we're developing our shareholder group, and we're really trying to educate our whole group on being good, responsible owners and good stewards of the business. And that's the kind of the next challenge for us as a family. But I know the one point you want me to also share, I bet, is around right after all of that took place. We were, it was actually last summer when we were getting ready to bring our new CEO on. I decided that, we needed some help, and my brother and I got together, and we really needed someone to help us have some of those conversations. How do you feel about not being the next choice? Or, how do you guys feel about bringing in a non-family CEO? And I can say my mom and dad weren't really ready to sit in those conversations. And the other question that we worked on with the consultant was, do you guys want to keep this business? Like, if you want to keep this business, you guys need to start acting like shareholders. So what does that mean? And what does owning a business mean? And we surfaced a lot of those questions with the consultants, because we were also seeing the fatigue that my parents had around owning, an auto parts business. Like, do they want to do that for the next 20 years? And they want to do more philanthropy. They want to have some more liquidity. So how do we do that if we want to keep the business? So we're saying, yeah, we love a family business. We want to keep the family business. But what does that actually mean? That's a big deal. So that's part of my work with next generation owners too, is trying to get them to say, do you really know what you're asking? Okay, so what are you doing about it? And kind of empowering, we were trying to empower ourselves, and we're still in that process of learning about owning a business. Okay, are you comfortable with this, debt structure and all of those big questions? And how do we get more liquidity to my parents and over time? And how do we, work together on that?
Good. John, you got, Phil has told you he is done in 18 months.
Correct.
How do you get ready for that? What are you doing to get ready for that?
Before I comment on that, let me just also mention about some senior leadership. We currently have 8 people in senior leadership positions, and of those 8, 4 are family and 4 are non-family. And you asked the question, how do you select? And it's not that difficult for the selection part. It's the emotional part afterwards. But simply put, you look at the position, you look at the qualifications, and you then look at the person. And that's kind of the process that we go through. And it's the fallout that you have to deal with later. It's not that simple, but you got to look at the qualifications and the positions really to make that happen. Our CEO, Phil Clemens, which some of you may have heard him speak or know him, he's been in the business now. I think he's 40 some odd years. In 2 years, he has mandatory retirement, so he'll be out the door. And so we've had to think about how to replace Phil, because he's larger than life, like your father is. So we've had to be very intentional about this. And the whole process actually began 15 years ago, and just getting next generation leaders prepared for the business. And we have actually training that we do for family members in the business that we actually call Lessons in Leadership. and we get together 4 times a year for a couple hours at night. And those sessions are really about character development. It's about business development. We give them exposure to various positions and opportunities in the business, and it's a mentoring back and forth amongst the group. So that's been going on for about 15 years.
Is that the filter? You want me to pull that slide up?
No,
Okay.
no,
Oh,
not
okay.
at this point.
All right.
So that's how we start. But our procedure to find Phil's replacement and work through it is we actually have a succession committee of the board. It's made up of 3 of the outside board members and 1 member from the Owners Advisory Council. And what that succession committee does is they will look at the current field of potential people just through observation, because we do bring potential candidates to sit into the board meetings. We have family members and shareholders sitting in on the board meetings each meeting. So there's just observation by this succession committee. What they'll do is they'll kind of look at some people, identify them, and those people then will be somewhat coached along the process and let them know that they're being considered for a replacement to the CEO. So that whole coaching process, identification thing, that has been going on for a number of years. And when it came time for Phil's replacement, the succession committee had 3 people identified as a replacement for Phil. So those 3 people then would go ahead and interview with the succession committee and the OAC member, and learn more about them directly and ask some pointed questions about them and learn more about them. And from that group would then select, the succession committee would then make a recommendation back to our board of directors for the replacement for Phil. And that process has just been completed, and in August we announced that the successor to Phil will be Doug Clemens, who's the current president of the Clemens Food Group. So Doug will be transitioning into that position starting as of now. And what that looks like for the next 18 to months or so, he'll start the process, and I want to make sure I get the dating right on this, but what will happen for the next when we get to 9 to 12 months from Phil's retirement, what's really important for Doug to become effective as a CEO is Phil needs to get out of the way. And that's probably the hardest part in succession planning, because the individual either sticks around too long or doesn't stick around long enough, so we feel timing is pretty important. So between 12 and 9 months, Phil needs to be gone at least 1 week per month with no contact to the business. So he's out of there. From months 9 through 6, Phil needs to be gone 2 weeks out of the month, again with no contact or interaction in the business. And then when you get down to 3 to 6 month period, then he's required to be gone 2 weeks a month again, but they've got to be consecutive weeks. So it spreads out a little bit. And then once it gets down to that point, when it comes down to we're about 3 months away from Phil officially stepping down, then Phil needs to be gone for 3 weeks out of the month, which allows Doug to kind of filter himself back in there. There's kind of a weaning, if you will, kind of a weaning off process with him to get Doug prepared. But keep in mind, Doug has been involved in this leadership training for the last 15 years. So it wasn't something that, 18 months, 24 months from now, hey, Doug, you're the person. It's been an ongoing process that he's been being developed over the time frame. What's important with that is now Doug has to begin that process, because now Doug has 18 to 24 months to find his replacement for the Clemens Food Group, and that will come out of those 8 senior leaders will come out of that group. The selection will come out of that group as well.
Okay. Part of what Mark had asked, right, Mark, was how do you get, so the question he was asking, how do you get the next generation of owners prepared? How do you ensure, I think all of us would agree that entitlement is, it's a cancer, and it's cancerous for our society, it's cancerous in a family business. What do you do to ensure that the next generation family members are motivated, that they understand the rules, and you avoid that entitlement? What are you guys doing, Carolyn?
So what we do, and I'll definitely, I thought it was a very good question. What we do is we have, for many years, we have an annual family meeting. We hold it in New York. We feel like it's important because it's a way for the shareholders, and I mentioned we have, we're now up to, close to 60. So it includes spouses. We have, in our shareholder group, we have, is everyone who's above 18 and up. There is a push now to get it down to 16, but it's 18 and up is, you have a vote at this point. And the reason, as I said, to hold it in New York is because on one of the days we actually have a business meeting held at the New York Times, where the goal is for the shareholders to have a better sense of the company and the product, and to understand the history and the legacy and what's going on currently, and that's what we really feel is important. And another day, and it's now currently at 2 days. It used to be actually 3 days, but felt like it was getting a bit too long. The other day is dedicated to really family issues. So it's run by the family council on that day. One day is run by the trustees, who really are more of the interaction between the family and the business. The other day is run by the family council, where we talk about issues having more to do, again, with family issues. So it might be more about an investment pool that the family is working on currently. It might have to do with some philanthropy, because we do a lot of stuff around philanthropy. But it might go back to sort of going back to your question. There are lots of decisions that as shareholders we vote on. So one thing that I particularly philosophically agree with, and I think as a family we've really tried to practice and preach, because again we've learned, is that as opposed to a group of people saying, well, I'll go back to the example of like the family career development. Well, we think, criteria now is that if you're going to work in the company, it is, A, B, C, and D. What instead we tend to do, again, we've learned this the hard way, is we'll say, let's talk as a family about what do people think the criteria should be as a family. Because what's happened is that if you try to, you can propose certain things, but if you try to say to a group, especially of younger people, this is what it needs to be, number one, you'll often get pushback, but then what happens is they don't feel involved really in the conversation, and they don't feel involved in the decision. Where if you tend to open it up a bit more and say, this is some of the things we're thinking about, but what do you think? Usually what will end up happening is everyone will sort of come up with the same criteria, and it ends up happening that people get more motivated. So if I go back to this topic in particular, our criteria is pretty significant for being involved. You have to have, first of all, working experience elsewhere before coming to work in the company. It has to be, it was at one point 3 years. It's gone up to actually 5 years. You have to have a college degree. You have to have a certain amount of recommendation. So it's, these are just a couple of examples of criteria. But again, if you didn't have your shareholder group coming up with that sort of on their own, then you wouldn't have the buy-in that I'm sort of talking about. So that's something as a family I think we've all learned. And there are a number of decisions that have been made over the years that way. But going back to sort of Mike's question, so the annual shareholder meetings are something we've done, and I think people love it because it's very easy, I think, for anyone to go to the company and get very excited. We see all these, cool apps of what's coming out, and, the product and what's kind of going on with the company. It's a great way to sort of have a, sort of a mini reunion. The other thing we do is we do have sort of 6 months later, family reunion, which is not, it's not company-based, but it's really a way for us as a family to get together and spend time. I was so privileged to grow up with a great-grandmother who didn't pass away until I was actually out of college. And she was really the matriarch for our family. And she was the one, she didn't work in the business. She was the only daughter of Adolph Ochs, who was really the founder of the company. But she was this, incredible personality, sort of that larger-than-life figure who everyone, just adored. And it was really with her passing that all the governance stuff started, and we all everyone sort of pulled together. But it was really her legacy that I think pulled everyone together. And it was really then that everyone said, we have to have these reunions. She had this wonderful place that we used to gather together in Connecticut every summer. So the reunions have sort of taken the place of her property, I would say, and us all getting together and having fun for a family. And we switch off different people's homes. We've done a couple different places, but that's another way for us to really get together as a family, which have continued and people enjoy. But I want to pass it on to others. But we do a few different things. We've also sent people to different conferences. Kellogg's had some. We try to, put some money aside to do sort of different training for people who are interested in some family governance. So we've done a couple of different things to help out with some of the stewardship initiatives that we've tried over a number of years.
So how do we prepare our shareholder group? We are, like I said before, we are in more the early stage process of having consistent family meetings, doing some education work. This coming up, our next family meeting, we have a relationship systems coach, which is part of my background, but I hired someone to come in and they did an assessment on our conflict resolution and also communication. They did it like an internet assessment, and we're going to work through that as a family. And it's just, kind of year by year trying to, get some of them to come to family business conferences with me, or if I'm speaking somewhere, I, roped my brother into speaking with me this June, and that was a great opportunity because both our spouses came and we had a really fun time together. And a lot of it is just that intangible, kind of, it's not about the process, it's more about the relationship building, because, something that I've been challenged with my dad and my brother working in the business together is they have a habit of sharing stuff together and then not including the rest of us in the conversation because they're, 2 doors down from each other. So that's been, something trying to re-educate the culture of our family to be more inclusive and to see us as a unified shareholder group and have one voice. So that's really my job as the family director. I'm working on getting everybody educated on governance. What does that word mean? It's like such a big kind of nebulous term, and it means something very different in publicly held companies than it does in private companies or family businesses. So, governance, family governance versus company governance, what does that mean? Well, my younger brother's not in business, so for him, that word governance, he just doesn't, he's learning about that. And I'm, and it's a day-by-day process, really. It's something that anytime there's, something like this going on, I invite my family members to, and we do a lot of philanthropy education, because that's something we are all shared values, and, we're all excited about philanthropy together. Although we all have differing, causes that we like to give to. So that's another place that we're working on educating. What are our shared values, and how do we move forward and educate ourselves as an ownership group, as the board of our foundation, and how do all those things work together?
Good.
I need
John,
to
you've
update our
got
slide.
258 shareholders.
Yeah, I need to update that. Maybe you saw me fiddling with my phone, but Tom just had a granddaughter, so it's now 6:31. The number has to be- if you want to flip to there's a pie
Yeah.
chart. Just real briefly on this, and then we'll go to the next one. But we've got a lot of people, a lot of family, and it's a pretty diverse group. Anywhere from a newborn that's a few minutes old now to 97. So we've got 630 of them. So we've got to be pretty intentional to try to reach them. So we attempt to do that. If you want to flip it one more time, Mike, is use this as a slide, this funnel somewhat as a metaphor. But what we try to do with our shareholders, and family, so we don't, when we try to expose them to the business, we don't separate family from shareholders, because what we hope to do with our family is to expose them not to what we do, but who we are. And we feel it's very, very important for them to grasp our legacy, our heritage, who we are, because what we do, as I said earlier, anybody can do what we do. Our difference is who we are. So we really try to be very intentional by doing that. And we do a whole bunch of different things with family, and we don't break them apart by generations, because it's difficult to do that, because there could be a 20-year spread in a generation. So we take our family, and we actually will dump all 631 of them in this funnel, and what we hope to do is through different activities try to get them connected and have passion about who we are, not what we do. And we do it all kinds of ways with the entire family. We do DVDs. We have monthly newsletters. Our DVDs would be about our heritage. The newsletters would be quarterly about the family. We'll hold family picnics where we get everybody together to kind of fellowship. We'll invite them to come into to our various facilities and take tours and see, feel, and touch. And we just want to get to know them and get connected with them, and hopefully they'll understand and grasp and have a visceral connection to our 118-year legacy. And as we do that, some people will actually kind of get it and grasp it. And as I kind of fall down through the funnel, we try to get a little bit more connected with them. And the ones that we become very intentional with is we get very intentional with the 16 to 20-year-olds and the 21 to 30-year-olds. And we see that 16 to 20-year-old is we want to get them before they go to college. because we want to find out what their interests are, what their desires are. So we will have functions with them twice a year where we all get together, and it's set up to be fun. And while we're having fun, without them realizing it, we want to teach them something about who we are. And we try to kind of camouflage that through fun games. It's not a sit-down and learning process. It's a fun activity. We've done stuff like, you've probably seen the show Win It in a Minute. We've done stuff like that. We've done Cousin Palooza, Iron Chef Cook-Off, team building. And it's just a lot of fun, and the educational part on some of these things. And we'll bring in second and third generation family members as judges and have them work side by side with these kids. And just through osmosis and storytelling. And the key thing about storytelling, you need to tell the good and the bad, because if it's all good, these kids will have a hard time living up to expectations. So they need to know about all the mistakes we've made, so they know that they don't need to be perfect. So it's just kind of hanging out and having fun with them. The 21 to 30-year-olds, that group is already out and in the workforce. And to connect with them, we will send them a survey and ask them to respond to a survey so we get to know them better. And those that respond to us, then we will get with them one-on-one and learn more about them and try to connect with them. And the ones that don't respond, we just kind of set them aside and think, at age 21 to 30, if you can't respond to something, what kind of interest do you have? So we kind of dead letter file them and put them off. Hopefully we'll catch them somewhere up at the top through some of the things that we do. But we try to develop that group, and as they come further down that funnel, we'll identify some of these kids through this process, and we'll try to hook them up through internships and get them involved in the business. We'll hook them up with mentors from in the business, and we'll try to help to career path them. And I think it's important to mention, we don't try to career path them into our business. We try to career path them to success. Because do we want them in the business? Absolutely. We'd love to have them because of the advantages of having family. But we want to prepare them so they can enter the business. And because if they're not prepared, they'll end up at our doorstep eventually as employer of last resort, and that's when you have to battle the entitlement part, and that's where you have to sit down and have those honest, open, gut-wrenching conversations to let them know that, you know what, you're just not available. So we attempt to just engage them the best we can. Something that's pretty cool that we just started that if you may want to consider doing is we have a summer school program. It's a 7-week summer school program we call the Leadership Academy. It's open to anybody that wants to attend. It's 7 nights, it's in the evening for 7 weeks, and they actually have an opportunity to have direct exposure to the business. Presentations is about 3 hours a night, and it's in-depth look into the business that's more of a classroom lecture style type thing, and that's really been something that's been worked out very, very well for us at Leadership Academy.
Good.
So you got your core values done. You figured out your mission statement, structure. Done. Personality conflict. How did you guys get past that? Because it's there for probably all of us. You know, you have 2 people, you have the same ideas, you want to do the same thing, but you're nothing alike. Where do you go from there?
That would be about 50% of my job, because in the past, those would end up either in the CEO's office or the president's office, and that doesn't add value to our shareholders. So I get them. And in most cases, the conflict is because the 2 people aren't talking to each other. There's a lot of triangulation going on. So,
Triangulation, what do you mean?
well, will talk to her, and she'll say something to him, and they're not confronting one another. They're not talking to each other. They're kind of communicating through others. So, and a lot of times when there's an issue, it's typically not really the issue that's the issue they're talking about. It's really not the issue. It's what Bob did to Tom on the swing set when he was 15. And I'm an in-law. So when I have conflict on my family side, it's tough for me to deal with. But when I have it on this side, it's pretty simple for me because I'm hearing what I'm hearing and I don't have history. So to answer your question, here's what you do. You sit down and out of love and honesty, you confront. And it sounds simple, and it's hard, but you've got to sit down and you got to tell the guy's father, hey, your son is not what you think he is. You know, he's not qualified. He's something other than you see. And you just have to have those direct, honest conversations and rest in the truth that you've done the right thing, you've done it out of love, and you just got to lay it out there and be honest. And it's not easy, but that's how you handle the conflict. Matt's
Other thoughts about what
We have
get-
this thing called the carpet, and we, sweep it under. But just kidding. We have kind of a conflict of cultures in my family. So my mom's from Arkansas, grew up on a farm with 12 brothers and sisters, and they didn't talk about conflict at all. And then my dad's the Italian side, and so we've got these warring cultures in a way. And over time, we have actually gotten really good at, putting off the conflict and discussing and not discussing them because we've all been, college and then had babies, and, you can easily get busy with life and kind of ignore things, and you get together every once in a while and it's like, ooh, you see the nerve, and you see, the reactions start. And so this is why in the last year and a half, I've been doing this in kind of my professional life as a coach. And I realized that my family needed a lot of work around that issue, and I didn't ever want to be the person helping them through that because, it's just, you don't want to be that person. It's too difficult. So they finally agreed to, put a budget. I asked them, gave them a number. I said, we need a budget to help us with this governance process, and we also, I refuse to be the outside the facilitator because I'm not outside and I'm part of the system. So, it's still a learning process. And I will say, with a non-family CEO, It's also an education process to help them understand. If they came from a public company or a private equity firm, governance budget like blows fuses with them. So it's also been an education process on their part to help, our CFO and our CEO understand that, this is kind of a risk management activity in the long term to keep the business with family shareholders, keep the business running and, keep those issues kind of separate from the family. And so we're working towards a process of learning how to handle conflict, whatever it is, conflict or I'm calling it contingency planning, which is not, it's my IT background. But if something happens, like what do we do if dad passes away suddenly and my whole family went, oh yeah, what do we do? How do we handle a major issue? So we're working towards, putting a plan together whenever a really challenging issue comes up. Let's create a plan before something happens. And so when that issue comes up, we can really separate out the emotions as much as possible, because we all know that that's impossible in family business. But let's come up with a proactive plan to handle these issues, so that so that we're learning conflict resolution and being proactive about the process before something really bad happens. Luckily, I can say we've been unscathed for the most part at this point. That's the wrong word, unscathed, but.
We're all scathed. But Carolyn, you have a
If I
big
can
family,
just-
don't agree on everything.
I mean,
So
I would say,
Can I
conflict.
tack on just one comment real
Yeah,
quick?
Go ahead.
To maybe help with that answer as well as, there's a lot of things that get said, and there's a lot of policies and thoughts and ideas in the family business. So we went ahead and put together a shareholder charter. It's a 20-some page document that outlines your rules and responsibilities as a responsible shareholder. And that gets referenced quite a bit because those are the guidelines and those are the rules. And and there's conflict resolution in there, and an employment policy, and business opportunities, and term limit. I mean, it's a whole bunch of information that they can reference. Doesn't resolve the conflict, but it allows you to be consistent. I don't mind making somebody angry as long as I'm consistently doing it the same way. That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I would say two things. I mean, one is that certainly, I think our conflict in our family has gone down. I mean, I think for two reasons. One is we've gotten better at figuring out how to manage it. I mean, that as a group, we've figured out how to, over the years, talk about things. The culture has changed. We've been trying to be more transparent. When difficult conversations need to happen, before, whether, some groups certainly would be, yelling and screaming. I mean, families, they're different, different groups have different ways of operating. So one group would have been, up in arms about it. Another group will, as you described, like sort of say nothing about it and just not talk about it for 5 years. So what we've tried to do as a family over time is, be more transparent, put issues out. At times, even my family who has used consultants, at one point was quite resistant to using them, but we have at times to figure out certain things and get better at resolving conflicts. And it's made a difference. I mean, believe me, certain topics that would have been completely taboo that we now actually can talk about it, and there is space to have the conversation. So it has made a difference. I think the other thing, and obviously when the two of us talk about, our structures, I mean, we are big families, we have these governance, and you all might say, oh my gosh, but we're a much smaller family and we don't have anything like that. And, and I completely understand. And when we work with some of these families who are much smaller, you might not have that level, but I suppose my point is that sometimes bits of governance and laying certain things out actually do help. Having, us, as Christin's is pointing out, when you have even certain, roles and responsibilities of I'm going to do this job and you're going to do this job, just putting some of that governance in place or structure in place often does make a difference, because people then have a sense of I'm going to do this and you're going to do that, or there are going to be some sort of guidelines. I mean, I feel like I've definitely seen that with my own two eyes in my family and in other families, that does usually take down some conflict. So that would be the other thing I would say.
Just an affirmation and a pitch for this idea of a family charter. I often say to family businesses, think about what's the difference between the history of the U.S. versus countries in Latin America. What's the big difference? We all know that in 2 years, whether you like President Obama or not, he's going to step out. He's not going to call the military and stage a coup. And yet, in Latin America, if I feel like sticking around, what do? I stay. If I'm a president, I stay. The difference between countries like that and this country is respect for the Constitution. There are rules, there are laws, and we respect them. And what John is talking about is establishing a set of rules, rules of the road. And here are the rules. The rules are, if you want to come to work in this business, you got to work 3 years outside the business. Or if you want to work in the business, you don't have to. Whatever they are. But a huge part of managing a successful leadership transition, as they're pointing out, is what are the rules? And having families get together and talk about those is critical. The idea of a family charter. And just an affirmation, the question about communication. Acknowledge and understand that we have not been given by our Maker. We are not given or born with incredible communication skills. So if I'm having a conflict with Christin or John, how I respond to that is all based on my own childhood. In my childhood, what do I do when I saw conflict? I ran. I'm out the door. That doesn't, but the point is having a set of rules, having the discipline for this is how we will deal with conflict because it is inevitable. And it will happen. And as Christin pointed out, if you sweep it under the rug, you're feeding a snake, and every day a snake gets bigger, and it's going to come back and bite you. The point is, do you have a set of rules for how you're going to do that? Yeah, comments, question? So how do you recruit and attract non-family talent when in some cases, not in this case, but in some cases, there's a glass ceiling? So what do you do?
I'll answer this. This was part of my urging for a long time to get our family to hire a non-family CEO. And, I was one of those people saying to myself, boy, I wouldn't want to go work in our family business if, I wasn't a family member. Because of that. And we have a very small shareholder group, but really, our company is 45 years old, and we have lots of multi-generational other families in our business over time. So we actually have more family members of other leaders. We've had them over time. So we've had different dynamics, and we've had, some leaders who had been in their positions. Our executive team had been the same for a long time. So we had some of that, and that was actually part of the impetus for really pushing, our family to look at it, having an outside CEO and bringing in some new ideas and new executives with, great experience from other companies. And I can say, it's been, and really the private equity firm was going to do that when we, that was really, I think behind my dad's real desire or, decision to sell the company was, I can't do this and get, this outside talent, like I need someone else to do it. And we are doing it now. Our CEO is committed to attracting and retaining top talent, and we've done a lot of hiring over the last few years.
Carolyn, you obviously have a whole bunch of non-family managers, but what have you seen outside of your own family in terms of the ability of families to attract and retain, and the keys to that?
I think it's an issue. I think that I'm thinking of a family we work with now, and one of the, it's actually an oil and gas company, and one of their top engineers is a non-family member, and one of the issues they have is they have a family member who's sort of looking to go in that position. And one of the sort of debates is just what you're talking about, is if they have family go into sort of these top positions, what is going to be the attraction, for non-family going into it, if you get it too family heavy at the top. So I think it's something that, and Mike, I'm sure you see it too. I mean, in terms of, throughout all industries, is sort of the dilemma of what you do. I think, how much room it's one of those, you want to have sort of the family ownership, and you want to have those values definitely at the top. I think there is definitely a case to make to have a family voice sort of being there in terms of top management. But if you clog up the system, are you gonna find sort of the outside? Are you going to have trouble getting people in and getting the bench strength that you need? And this is what was happening with this one particular company. I can think of a number of them.
Yeah, that's what kind of got us to where we were back in 2000, when we were heavily top heavy with family, more decision makers than decisions that had to be made. So when we made the switch, the flip to a business family, it's not that difficult to attract non-family top talent, because we share with them, our hiring practices for family. We share our charter with them, so they know the rules just like family knows the rules, and they see what we say we're going to do, and they see what we've done. So it just comes down to, again, evaluating the position, the qualifications, then you look at the person. So it's just a matter of just trying to run it as a business. And the only advantage family has is that any family member that wants to apply for any position, I'll guarantee them an interview. And that's as far as it gets. But beyond that, there's nothing more than that. And then what they'll get after that interview, if they really mess it up, is we'll bring them back in and tell them what they could have done better to kind of help them for the next one. So that's kind of the only advantage. And the thing that we struggle with family with, because we want to treat family the same as we do outside, but the truth is we don't, because we require family to work outside the business somewhere else, and that gets thrown in my face all the time. It's not fair. How come, this guy didn't have to, he came out of college, but I have to. That's not fair. And I guess my response is, you're right, it's not fair, but it's just, that's the way it is.
Also family members.
Yeah, I can give you a direct answer on that, because I was one of them. and I can tell you through the whole interviewing process, and the other one was Tom Clemens, who was going to be here, and I told the succession committee asked me, would you be interested in the position? And my answer was, yes, I would be, but I am not the best candidate. There's others that are more qualified, but if somebody gets run over by a bus, or if something happens that I need to step up, I'll do it. But I recognize the fact that I wasn't the best candidate for that position. So I was okay with it. I talked to Tom about it, because Tom, he thinks he's a good candidate for that position. And he and I had a lot of talks about that, and we talked through that of why not? And it comes down to just having those conversations. I asked him to sit down and put on a piece of paper what he thinks his strengths are and his weaknesses are, and do the same for your brother, because it was brothers, and list them. And we went over those and talked about why I felt that he wasn't the best candidate. And the reality of it is, people really know. They really know. It's just their feelings get hurt, and you have to just recognize that and empathize with that. But they really do know, and it comes down to just honest, open conversations,
Max.
Questions, and the second one will, I'm certain, open up a huge can of worms. But the first one is, you had mentioned earlier about legacy positions, what I call legacy positions. There are families that work for our family, for instance. And, it's seen as, well, the operations, of course, it's going to go to the next guy, and then his son and his son. And how is that dealt with in your organizations specifically?
So, so this was once again the impetus for bringing a new CEO into the mix, to make some, sense and clarity around roles and responsibilities, getting really clear about what is required for certain jobs. And I can say that We have a lot of people, and I say it in present tense because we still are, handling this issue. We have a very, very large, a large footprint for a company like ours dealing with competition in China and other low-cost countries. So our CEO is really taking a disciplined approach to this and a more strategic approach, looking at our footprint, looking at organizational redesign and strategy. This is, something that we're getting outside help with from consultants who do this all the time. And he can really be objective about the process. That's the one piece that, like I said, if my brother was here, he'd tell you that would have been so difficult and probably a battle he would have never been able to fight with my dad in a, and not that they fight. It's just, it's something that my dad is very personally passionate and close to. All of these people who have, blood, sweat, and tears, loyal families. We've, been to their weddings and funerals, and, we've just had a lot of personal relationships with so many of those multi-generational families. And I didn't speak to our family employment policy, but we actually had to use it with some of those families' kids. We used this our family employment policy is you have to work outside the business at least 2 years, and with family members, it's stricter. We have to have master's degrees and at least have 2 to 3 years work experience. So, so that's kind of how we and it was sticky and it's not fun, and some of those relationships have not really been restored like we'd like them to be.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and Max, to your point, I think it's very common to see in families that, look, our branch runs the grocery division, and our branch runs the wholesale division, and what it comes down to is, I think our panelists are pointing out, is, are we entitled to this, to be, this is ours? I mean, if we're going to, and I think families do that a lot, they personalize assets, and for my branch, we're the grocery division branch, and it comes back to, I think as our panelists are saying, is a conversation about, is this an entitlement or not? But Max, your next question.
My next question is, what if no one in a particular generation or moving forward is interested in becoming part of the business? And you've all addressed, how you deal with what seems like a flood of family members coming in and wanting to work for the business. What if no one is interested in working for the business?
So I get this question all the time because people say, why aren't you working in your family business? And it's I think it's something where in our business we have had this view, or all of us have had this unspoken thing that if you go into the business, you have to be on the CEO track. And so there's one career path, there's one way to do it. And like I said, my dad's a big personality. You got to fill his shoes, and I think that's held us back tremendously with that whole process. I mean, there are only 3 of us, and there are 3, in-laws now, and my husband actually. That's a whole nother story, and I know we don't have time for that. But my husband, left the business 2 years ago, and that was a whole process trying to get my parents okay and not feeling personalizing that decision. It was just like time for him to go, and he didn't really want to be the CEO, but that was really his only next kind of logical step in our minds. So what I've tried to do is work with our family shareholder group and say, hey, guess what? There's lots of roles you can do and be and still be connected and involved in the business. How about this? How about this? It's really important for our family group our family ownership group to have multiple paths to ownership and leadership. And this is my part of what I do with my clients, is helping them see, no matter where you are, if you're a mom staying home with your kid, you're a leader. And in your family company, you can be a leader and not be in an operating role. And that's something that I've really taken to heart myself. And I said, I am a family leader, and I'm important in this process. I'm important in the long-term health of our business. I just don't want to be in auto parts right now. So that's,
I've certainly seen several families, lots of families, who they're not involved in management, but they have a crucial role really in running their companies, and they've really, as Christin said, they've taken on being part of the board, being chair of the board, and been incredibly involved and offered great value. And it's really worked out, wonderfully. I'm working with a family right now who's just recently, over in the last couple of years, one of them moved out. It was a brother who retired and moved out of the CEO role, and they have a new, a non-family CEO for the first time. And it's him and his two sisters now are on the board. And they've also made the transition just in the last 5 years. They have really it's more of an advisory board of having two independents come in. And they're so involved in it. So they've really moved this company in a different role, in a different way, excuse me. And they're thinking about also how to get their next generation involved. They're in their, early 60s, and how to think about their 20, early 30-year-olds and how to involve them in ownership and stewardship. And maybe one of them will at some point work in the business. There are a couple interested in finance. But there's so many different ways, as Christin was saying, that you can be involved. Certainly in a board role, that would be an example, but in other ways too. So in a public company, obviously, it gets a little bit more tricky in terms of those lines. Board roles would always be, an opportunity. But in a private company, there are many different roles that are possible, and that we would all encourage for sure.
I think to answer your question, what do you do if you don't have somebody, qualified? And I think the answer to that is shame on us, the leadership, because that's one of our primary responsibilities to make that happen. So it's shame on us for not doing our jobs. But I think what we end up doing is we say that it's our desire to have a family at the CEO helm and at the president's helm, not a requirement, because you may come to a case where you don't have somebody that's qualified. The other thing, and I know I've talked with Doug Clemens about this as he gets ready to follow into Phil, and I think a lot of you probably have heard Phil or know Phil. And one thing Doug needs to wrestle with is he's not going to be Phil. He's going to be Doug. He's going to be Doug, the CEO, and he's going to be known for what his skill set is, and you've got to know that and not try to be somebody that you're not. And he was selected for the gifts and the strengths that he has, not because he's, a clone of Phil. Yeah, it was when they were notified about the changes we were going to make. It was pretty immediate. I mean, it wasn't like a phase out period. It was pretty immediate. We helped them through the process of counseling, career pathing. It was a very difficult time for them, but we offered as much services as we could to them. But in most cases, with the group, the expectation was that they would go outside and have an opportunity to return. And that would be the hope and the desire, and some have and some have not. Like my brother-in-law today, he's in Utah, and we've tried to hire him back several times, and we've not been able to get him back. We'd love to have him, but so we did make it pretty immediate. Others of more of a senior leadership position, they were to help the pain. They weren't let go per se. They were moved to another area. And so I mentioned our Owners Advisory Council. A lot of our senior leaders that were family, they ended up going into the Owners Advisory Council. And that group there is their goal is to speak as one voice for all shareholders. They're also responsibility for setting the owner's expectations, and they're also responsible for maintaining an excellent board of directors. So they went to that position, and that was a challenge for them because there was a lot of hurt feelings there. Then they were in a pretty important position to kind of guide the family going forward. So that was kind of a challenge. But in most cases, it was pretty quick and swift. Does that answer your question? A few. Well, the one that won't return, he's wildly successful, and it's really hard on his father and my father-in-law because he misses him. It's really tough on him, and he had to put him on the plane.
It was, and I know some of those family members, and I remember sitting with a 45-year-old man when he was in tears about having been let go by his family. So it was very, very painful.
It's still there, and the stuff
that.
I struggle with today.
Yeah.
Some of the people that were affected, I have some that were moved to a different position, and their kids have struggled in the business. Okay, the next generation, their kids have struggled, and it's tough to deal with because they have all the emotions for what happened to them, and they feel it's happening to their kid, and it's unjust. They're out to get me, and you got to work through that stuff, and that's where you have to tell them, here's the real story.
Yeah. Brian.
Yeah, I have a question that sort of follows up on her question, but actually is a little bit earlier in the process. I'm presently involved in a third-generation family business, and we're in the process. I liked your phrase of going from a family business to a business family, and we're in the process of trying to make that happen. But we're in a situation where there is conflict among the ownership group with respect to making that happen. And there are three different families that are owners of the business, and there's a member of each family who are managers in the business. Two of those three family members don't have any outside experience, and I think there's a lot of fear associated with professionalizing the business and making it a business. And so in the context of your transition at Clemens and I guess times as well, it sounds like there was some of this. What did you do about conflict at the ownership group level? Because I have to imagine that those owners are also family members, and they see their blood relatives, the prospect of them being put out on the street eventually or whatnot. How did you address and resolve the conflict at the ownership level in order to get to the point of making that transition from a family business to a business family?
You can imagine, I think what you're saying, Brian, is you can imagine family branches lining up. You're going to fire my father or brother, I'm going to, and then so you've got these branch dynamics. Tough.
When we started the process, all family branches were included in the process. So a representative from each family branch had a seat at the table. So each family branch had veto power because, as I said earlier, it had to be a 100% vote. So they were involved in the process. They knew what was going to happen from the beginning. Oh, well, they didn't know what was going to happen. They knew what options were going to be explored from the beginning. They were involved through the entire process, and they knew what was going to happen. And at the end of the day, they had to vote. They had to stand up, and they had to vote. So they were engaged. They were involved. They weren't surprised, and they knew what they had to do. And the thing that kept us focused, because things felt good. One of the big problems was when I said sales continue to increase, the owners realized that they didn't have any more money to give away. And that's what drives a lot of the owners, is they like to give money away. And they ask the question, why? Well, how come there's less money to give away each year if sales are growing? So that was a driving force, and what came out of that was if we don't make changes, we're not going to be around. We're not going to be around. So the choice is it goes back to what the consultant always asks us. Is this the easy thing or the right thing? So keeping them engaged, informed, and asking the question, is it the easy thing or the right thing? We just plowed through it and had everybody involved. the plan B could have been to do nothing. If you make no change, then we would continue to fumble along and not be here today. Would have been the plan B, or the other part of possible options on the table would be to merge, go public. I mean, there was all kinds of options, but they agreed on the onset that we want to keep this business in the family. It's an heirloom. We want to maintain it. We want to keep it, and that was the driving force. I think you've mentioned earlier, you have to answer that fundamental question. Do we want to maintain this family business? And the answer was yes. So at that point, if it wouldn't have gone through, I don't think they had a plan B in mind, but there was a lot of options talked about before they decided to move forward.
Carolyn, what have you guys done with?
Thank you. Okay. For us, this was really probably more around some ways succession issues, if you will, around a fourth generation, and having at that point 5 at the company, and figuring out sort of, in some ways, succession, who are going to be the top leaders, but also is everyone going to be staying in the same capacity? And when you ask the question about the owners, who you're right, we had 4 branches at that time. We still have 4 branches, but it was really 4 seniors, if you will. I wasn't in the room, but the story goes that it was a combination of things. It was a bit of negotiating, and it was a bit of going, I think, to what you were saying, of what is going to be the best thing for this company, which honestly will always, in some ways, come first a bit. And maybe I shouldn't say that. It's a little bit of what's the best thing for the company and what is the best thing for the family going forward. How can we talk about these things, and how can we make what's the best outcome? It's not an easy process, but what are we going to do about this situation? And I think it went round and round. I think these owners were not only one was in a management position at this time, but it was clear that these were their children, so there were big implications to it. But the thing we've been talking about, I think, is you need to get the family, you need to get them involved in the process. They need to be sort of carried through with some of these shareholder decisions and what the business is doing, or you sort of lose the family. So it was a process, but it wasn't easy. But in the end, it was sort of, I think people knew this was the right thing to do, and there were tears. There's no question.
Just want to, Max, one other question, then I want to summarize what I think our panelists have suggested. Go ahead.
My question is, a lot of family companies have different goals. One might be they want to run a newspaper. Another might be they just want to make as much money as possible, and they'll invest in whatever it takes to do that. Something that we actually, in my company, we've been trying to sort of figure out as well. But during these successions, has that goal ever changed? Did it go from, wanting to employ people in Philadelphia to making as much money as possible, or whatever that may be?
I think the succession, the leadership transitions have not made the change in terms of what the company goals have been. That's not been the case in our experience. I think that the goal for us is to be sort of the best and the best news distribution company where as we go into the future, and to do it the best we can, and to make the most profit for our shareholders, which of course includes the family as well. But the transitions or the succession has never changed that goal.
That's a hot topic question for us right now, because it's something we're discussing as an ownership group because of the leadership transition, and our governance conversations are, what is the most important thing to us as a family? My brother and I, when we were working with the coach, worked on that. What do we share? Like, what is really driving us to look at, do we want to keep this business a family business, or, you know, in the next few years, do we want to try to sell it and make as much money, whatever. And I can say my father's goals with the company have always been to provide jobs for people. He feels like that's part of his, you know, mission in life, and why he's here on the earth is to give people jobs, and that's the best way you can, you know, help people. That is something that our new CEO, not so sure, because he comes from the public, you know, a private equity firm. He comes from he calls it, you know, Ford is a family business. It's the same thing. I said, it's apples and oranges, Ford and a 100% privately held family business. So he and I have that debate regularly, and it's a healthy debate, you know, and he's really looking at how to maximize profits and grow the business and keep, you know, new talent and retain them, keep them excited. And so this is actually a very, you know, that's a timely question that we're dealing with right now. And we as an ownership group need to come up with a shared voice on that. So that's what we're working on, actually.
We do talk about that quite a bit, and we try to keep it simplified with our vision. And our vision is we would like to operate diversified, profitable businesses that honor the Lord Jesus Christ. So it doesn't say what we're doing. It can be cold storage, it can be farming, it can be widgets, it doesn't matter. But as a family and as a business, we try to really stay focused on that vision, and that's what we want to accomplish.
We're to summarize some of what you all have said. I mean, I think that that last point, and if we're going to be a family that is successful in managing our leadership transition, a number of things that the panel has spoken on. One, go from intuitive to the intentional. So take those core values that are part of who you are and the opportunity that we have as a family business. It's a unique opportunity. In fact, if our family business isn't going to reflect those core values, why do we even bother continuing to have it? But make those values, take it from the intuitive to the intentional. Make them real and have that be guide us. That's part of what you said. Secondly, you talked about this idea, I put words around it, of thinking and talking about your ownership options continuum. What are our options as owners? And each of you described having gone through a process of talking about, do we want to remain a family business for the next 100 years? Do we want to sell in the next 2 years? Is that a bad thing? That's a really healthy thing to do. So as we families prepare for this leadership transition process, at the ownership level, let's have a discussion about what is the ownership options continuum. And the key to that, as you've mentioned, is do we have good communication? Are we willing and able to be disciplined about what we refer to as coming to the line, being willing to talk about all the options, to be willing to talk about the conflict? Because if we can't have good, honest conversations, our ownership options continuum goes from being this wide to this wide. If their family had said, no way, screw it, we're not talking about it, we're not going to explore professionalizing, we're not going to do this, their options would have been fairly slim. We're going to drive the business into the ground. But because they were willing to have these dialogues, because they were willing to create this meritocracy, they had a whole bunch of options. And look what the family has done. In the face of, you know, a sense of entitlement, they've moved from entitlement to a diversified business. And that spoke to something Carolyn mentioned, which is deliberately managing the interaction between your family and your business, and using policies, deliberate discussions about what are the rules of the game, what's the rules for our family members getting involved, professionalizing those. You talked about the role of the board of directors and the role that a board can have in managing a leadership transition. So it's not, you know, Phil deciding, do I like this brother, do I like John, or you know, your dad deciding I'm picking here. It's a process. So we say, and I think you've affirmed, have a board of directors with outsiders, focus on a process, not a person. And then also clarify what are the roles of shareholders, preparing the next generation. That becomes a very deliberate. Mark, you asked about that. I think what we heard here was very deliberately talking about what are the expectations of the next generation of family business owners. And do you have to be a manager to be an owner? Can we be owners and not managers? How are we going to do this? But it's a dialogue. We talked about process versus person. You all mentioned the power of stories as a great example of, and I think we underestimate the power of stories. There was a great article in the Harvard Business Review about how part of great leadership is the ability to tell stories. And John, you mentioned telling stories about and sharing at the senior generation level both where we succeeded and where we failed. Very, very powerful for next generation folks to understand that, hey, we're not perfect. You talked about communication code of conduct in the family charter, the rules of the road, expectations, building a meritocracy. These are the rules by which we're going to manage this transition, professionalization. Carolyn, Christin, and John, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. We are grateful for your input, your insight. And I want to share with you all a gift from St. Joe's, a bottle of wine. There you go, for each of you. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. Carolyn, I think since you're going to hop a plane, and Carolyn has to hop on a plane real quick, that's going to be tough to get on the airplane, won't it? So we'll send it to you. But I know Carolyn has to run, but the other guests are going to be around. We're around. I want to thank you all for coming. Just very quickly, we've mentioned this. People often say, hey, how often are you successful working with family businesses? What's your success rate? And the answer, I think all of us would agree, is, will the family stay in the game? Because if family members pound their fist on the table and say, screw it, I'm out of here, we will not be successful. If family members will, I share this because my kids love Larson so much. So, if we'll just calm down, we'll try this one more time. If we as shareholders can take that attitude towards any issue, we have a really good shot of being successful. Membership of the Family Business Center here at St. Joe's, we're thrilled to have you in the room. We want to talk to each of you about potentially becoming members. And our goal in working with our members is to help them lay out a plan for long-term success. That's our goal. We do a number of things to help you get there, very specific to your family, designing a specific program for your family, exposing you to really thoughtful leaders in the field of family business like Carolyn, Christin, and John, and we'll be in touch with all of you. And if you're interested, please come see me afterwards. Finally, next time in October, Franco Lombardo, who's the author of our money motto, who does a great job of talking about relationship between families and their money. And whether you got a big pot of money or a little pot of money, money impacts our families in dramatic ways, and he has a really unique perspective about that. And finally, in December, a friend, Peter Linneman, who is the director of the real estate program at Wharton, will talk about how to think about real estate as a strategic asset in our portfolio, as I know all of these board members have. So hope to see you in October. And again, thank you very much for coming. We'll be here. And again, thank you.